The basketball court behind the community center was almost empty, except for the echo of a bouncing ball and the quick rhythm of sneakers on pavement. Jaden Miller, 13 years old, tall for his age and already carrying the quiet focus of someone who thinks more than he speaks, practiced layups alone. The sun was starting to set, turning the sky into streaks of orange and violet. It should have been the kind of evening that felt safe and ordinary, but that's not how it went. A police cruiser rolled up beside the fence, slow, deliberate, lights off, just presence. Two officers stepped out. Their movements weren't rushed. They weren't responding to anything. They were looking. Jaden paused, ball under his palm. The taller officer smirked. Well, look at that. Out past curfew already? His tone wasn't questioning, it was assuming. It's not curfew yet, Jaden answered, voice steady. Not rude, not scared, just facts. The shorter officer laughed. Listen to him. Lawyer boy. Jaden didn't respond to that. He was good at holding silence when people hoped he'd snap. The taller officer walked closer. Where's your mother? He asked. She know you're out here alone? Jaden hesitated only a second too long. The officers exchanged a look. Oh, right, the shorter one said with a grin that wasn't really a grin. Your mother's a judge, isn't she? He exaggerated the word, stretched it, mocked it. Jaden felt his chest tighten, but his face didn't change. He had learned young that reacting made things worse. He had seen enough to know how stories get rewritten when they travel through uniforms. He just nodded once. Yes, sir. The taller officer whistled dramatically. Wow, look at that. We got royalty out here? What's she judge, huh? Traffic tickets? The other officer laughed loud, too loud, like laughter that tries to prove power. Jaden didn't move. He didn't look down. He didn't look up. He just stayed still. That stillness made them uncomfortable. Silence always does when a person expects fear. All right, superstar, the taller officer finally said. Turn around. Hands behind your back? For what? Jaden asked. No anger, just the question. Suspicious activity, the officer replied instantly. The practiced phrase? The one that fills in the blanks when there are no blanks. Jaden swallowed, throat tight, but voice controlled. I was just playing basketball. The shorter officer shrugged. Sure, and I'm the mayor. They handcuffed him, not gently, and led him to the cruiser. Jaden didn't cry, he didn't yell, he didn't argue. He just repeated one thing. I need to call my mom. The taller officer laughed again, the kind of laugh that tries to crush instead of amuse. Oh, don't worry, we'll call her, he said. We want to see this judge of yours. The cruiser door shut and the echo of it was louder than the laughter. The ball rolled slowly across the court and came to rest against the fence. The sky kept darkening. The city kept ignoring. Jaden stared forward, breathing steady, jaw set, knowing one thing with absolute clarity. They had no idea who they had just called. But they were about to. The station was cold in the way government buildings always seem to be. Too bright, too clean, too empty, in all the places that should have held warmth. Jaden sat on a hard plastic chair near the intake desk, hands cuffed in front of him now, not behind. Someone had thought that counted as kindness. He kept his back straight, his breathing steady, but his jaw was set tight, the muscle flickering every few seconds. He wasn't scared. He was waiting. Across the room, the two officers filled out paperwork, smirking, talking too loudly, the way people do when they feel sure of themselves. Every few words, one of them would look over at Jaden, not to check on him, but to make sure he still felt small. Think she'll come? The shorter officer asked. Oh, she'll come, the taller one said. Women like that always come. They just think they're powerful until they're sitting where everybody else sits. He glanced at Jaden and exaggerated a pitying smile. You're just like everyone else in here, kid. Jaden didn't answer, because he had already heard the front doors open. He didn't even have to turn. Footsteps, heels on tile. Sharp but unhurried, not heavy, not fast. Just purposeful. A rhythm that no one else in the building had ever walked with. The two officers stopped talking mid-sentence without meaning to. Something in the air had changed. The desk sergeant sat up straighter. A young rookie stood without knowing why. Jaden finally lifted his gaze. His mother walked through the lobby like she owned every inch of it, and not because of arrogance, but because she carried authority the way some people carry breath, quietly, constantly, undeniably. Judge Naomi Miller, black suit, crisp blouse, hair pulled back, eyes sharp enough to cut through fabric and excuses and lies all at once. She did not rush to Jaden. She did not run. She did not raise her voice. She looked at the taller officer first. "Who filed the charge?" she asked. Her tone was calm, polite, deadly. The officer opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The shorter officer tried instead. "We, received a call about possible suspicious—" Naomi raised one hand, just one. Not high, not abrupt. And he stopped speaking like a switch had been pulled. "Where is the incident report?" she asked. No one moved. "Where is the recorded body cam footage?" she continued. Still nothing. Her voice didn't change volume. It didn't need to. "I'm sure the two of you followed proper detainment procedures before arresting a minor. I'm sure you read him his rights. I'm sure you notified a guardian immediately. I'm sure there was probable cause documented and time-stamped." Not a single person in the room breathed normally. "Because," she continued, placing her briefcase on the counter with gentle precision, "if any one of those things did not occur exactly as outlined in department protocol, then you have unlawfully detained and restrained a child with no legal justification." Her gaze settled on them. Not angry, just sure. "And I will own this building by morning." The room didn't burst into chaos. It fell into silence. Heavy, total, unavoidable. Jaden's hands were still cuffed. Naomi finally turned, just enough to look at him. Her voice softened, not weaker, just warmer. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "No," Jaden answered quietly. "Good." She looked back at the officers. "Remove the cuffs." They hurried, not from fear of punishment, from fear of truth. The truth that the power dynamic they assumed was real never belonged to them at all. The metal clicked open. Jaden's wrists were free. Naomi rested a hand lightly on his shoulder, not to comfort him, but to stand with him. "Let's go," she said. And no one stopped them. Not because they couldn't, but because in that moment, everyone knew the real authority in the room. They stepped out of the station into the cool night air. Streetlights flickered above them. Cars hummed by. The world was still moving as if nothing had happened, as if some rooms didn't just shift their gravity. Naomi didn't speak at first. She never rushed words. Jaden walked beside her, matching her pace without thinking. He didn't look shaken, just thoughtful. Not surprised at her arrival, only thoughtful about how it all happened. When they reached the car, Naomi paused before unlocking it. "Give me your wrists," she said. Jaden held them out. Faint red marks circled his skin, the shape of pressure, not pain. Naomi traced one thumb lightly over the mark. Not tenderly, not dramatically, just acknowledging. "That shouldn't have happened," she said simply. "Not to you. Not to anyone." Jaden nodded, staring at the marks like they were something he already knew how to carry. "But I didn't cry," he said quietly. Naomi looked at him. "I know," she replied, "but listen to me carefully." She stepped closer so he couldn't look anywhere else but at her. "You don't need to be unhurt to be strong, and you don't need to pretend you aren't scared to have courage." Her voice was steady, the kind of steady that you feel in your spine. Jaden swallowed and his shoulders loosened, just a fraction. She opened the car door but didn't get in. "Do you remember what I always say?" she asked. Jaden exhaled. "Power isn't volume," he said. Naomi nodded once. "It's clarity." Silence settled between them, not heavy, just real. She finally sat in the driver's seat and Jaden slid in beside her. As they pulled onto the street, Naomi kept her eyes forward. "When I put on that robe in court," she said, "people think it gives me authority. But authority doesn't come from fabric, or title, or the room you're in." She paused, letting the thought land before continuing. "Authority comes from knowing who you are before anyone tells you otherwise." Jaden listened, and he understood. Not like a child repeating an idea, but like someone who had lived now a piece of it. After a moment, he asked quietly, "Did you know they'd talk to me like that someday?" Naomi didn't soften her expression. She didn't sugarcoat. "Yes," she said. Jaden nodded once. Not angry, not defeated, just informed. Then what am I supposed to do next time? He asked. Naomi glanced at him then, really looked, her gaze steady and bright like city lights held in dark glass. Exactly what you did today, she said. You stood. You stayed calm. You remembered who you were. That is strength, Jaden. The kind that terrifies the people who try to make you small. Jaden's lips tightened, not in fear, in purpose. He turned his eyes back to the road, the city lights flickering across the window, his reflection faint beside his mother's. He wasn't just her son. He was being shaped, not to survive the world, but to stand in it. The car moved forward through the night, and Jaden did too. The next morning, the police station looked the same on the outside, brick, glass, and a flag that swayed in the breeze. But inside, something had changed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't spoken. It was the kind of tension that comes when people know they are about to be seen. The two officers from the night before sat in the briefing room, uniforms pressed, backs stiff. They weren't joking today. They weren't leaning back in their chairs. They stared straight ahead, because Judge Naomi Miller had not let the night end at the parking lot. She had filed the inquiry before she even unlocked her front door. And now, the police chief stood at the front of the room with a clipboard and a face set like stone. We have a situation, he said. No one needed details. Everyone already knew. The chief looked directly at the two officers. A minor was detained with zero probable cause. No charges, no cause for arrest, no guardian notification. Body cameras were not activated. The words fell like weight. Real weight. Do either of you care to explain? The taller officer opened his mouth, but the words died before they formed. He had bluster last night. He had nothing now. The shorter one tried to salvage what he could. We didn't know who she was. Silence. Dead. Suffocating silence. The chief's jaw tightened. That's the problem. He stepped closer, voice low and controlled. You didn't need to know who she was, or who he was. The law doesn't apply based on who someone is. And if you act like it does, he leaned in, just enough. You are not law enforcement. You are bias wearing a badge. No yelling, no slamming. Just truth that hit harder than either. The door opened. Everyone turned. Naomi walked in. Not in a robe, not in courtroom formality. Just herself. But somehow, that was heavier. The officers nearly stood, out of reflex, then didn't, realizing standing meant acknowledging authority. Naomi didn't address them first. She addressed the room. When you arrested my son, she said, you believed you were correcting someone smaller than you, someone with less power, someone who should learn their place. Jaden stood behind her, not hiding, not shrinking, simply present. Naomi continued, my son does not need your permission to exist in public space, and no child in this community should fear your approach. Some heads bowed, some eyes flicked away, a few stung. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You are sworn to protect, not to intimidate, not to guess, not to assume. Her eyes moved to the two officers. You didn't fail because you misjudged who he was. You failed because you misjudged what you were supposed to be. The taller officer's throat tightened. His hands curled. Not in anger, but in realization. Naomi stepped aside, and Jaden walked forward. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't glare. He didn't shake. I'm not afraid of you, he said. I'm not angry at you either. But I remember everything you said. Not a threat. A record. A truth. The chief nodded once. The disciplinary paperwork was already prepared. Suspension pending review. Not revenge. Accountability. Naomi turned and Jaden followed her out. No victory speech. No triumphant music. Just a door opening and closing. And the understanding that strength isn't proven in the moment of confrontation. It is proven in what follows. Jaden stepped outside into daylight, breathing in the morning like it was a new place. Because it was. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The world was finally learning to look at him. The walk home from the station was slow, not because either of them needed time to recover, but because they understood what had just happened. Some things are worth walking through, not rushing past. The neighborhood was waking up. School buses hissed at curbs. Neighbors watered small square lawns. Windows blinked with early light. Ordinary life, wearing the same face it always did. But the world felt different to Jaden. Not because he was suddenly untouchable. Not because the officers were punished. Not because his mother had won. It was something quieter. He understood himself now. In the place where understanding matters most, inside. They reached their front door. Naomi unlocked it, and Jaden stepped inside first. For a moment, the house was filled only with the sound of their breathing. Familiar walls, familiar shoes by the door, familiar scent of coffee in the air. Naomi set her briefcase down and finally allowed herself to exhale fully. The breath of someone who had held their composure, not because they were unshaken, but because they chose strength over reaction. Jaden turned to her. "Mom," he said softly. She looked up. He didn't ask why she didn't yell. He didn't ask how she stayed calm. He didn't ask if she was angry. He asked something different. "Are you proud of me?" The question wasn't small, it was enormous. Naomi stepped closer, placing her hand against the side of his face, not cupping, not holding, just anchoring. "I have always been proud of you," she said, "not for being strong, but for knowing when strength is quiet." Jaden nodded, eyes steady. He took that in. Deeply. Later that week, Jaden returned to the basketball court. Same court, same net, same sound of sneakers on pavement. But this time, a few younger kids stood by the fence watching him. Not because he was older, not because he was better, because they had heard the story. One of them stepped forward. "Can you teach me that layup?" he asked. Jaden bounced the ball once, twice. "Yeah," he said, "come here." He didn't tell them what happened at the station. He didn't need to. His presence said enough. Strength was not about being feared. Strength was about being seen and standing anyway. And across the city, in offices and courtrooms and living rooms, people told the story differently depending on who they were. Some said a judge embarrassed two cops. Some said a kid was arrested for nothing. But the truth was simpler. A boy didn't shrink, a woman didn't break, and a system had to face itself. The world didn't transform overnight, but one line had been drawn, clearly. A line that said, "You may try to decide my place, but you will never decide my worth." And that was enough.